So we're diving into a new series this month, and we're going to be talking about God's mission, both near and far, both here and there, all over the world, including just outside our front door. And as we do that, there's going to be some exciting things. At the end of this month, we are actually going to be having a guest speaker. His name is Paul, and he's going to be sharing about God's work all over the world as he's seen it, and about where he's seeing the Spirit of God move. He's going to be sharing some stories with us. But also this month is big for us because at the end of the month, we're going to be setting aside everything that comes into our church that week in terms of financial giving and give it to our Great Commission Fund. Now, if you don't know what our Great Commission Fund is, our Great Commission Fund is how the Christian and Missionary Alliance supports 50% of its international workers' income. So 50% of their income is completely covered. They don't have to worry about a thing just because we sacrificially give. And so I want to ask you, even now, though it's a month away, at the end of the month, I want you to be asking the Lord and praying what he would have you bring as a gift that week. Everything we bring in this week, it won't come to cover our general budget. We're going to give that right back out to the Great Commission Fund. All right, so it's going to be an exciting week. I'm excited to start it off today as we talk about the inseparable mission of God. It got me thinking about some irreducible qualities of things. What makes a thing a thing? I was thinking about it personally, and 3 years ago, I was at a different church, and it was the first time I tried to quit there. And Janine and I started interviewing at a few different churches. We were interviewing at a couple in Nashville, and they were good churches, right? They were pretty sizable. I wasn't going to be the senior leader or anything. I was just going to be on staff there, which was cool. But as we were kind of considering the opportunities, we were processing with different people in our life, and Janine was talking with one of her mentors, and she brought back the story of this conversation that really stuck out to me. And as she was talking with one of her mentors, she was talking about the opportunity at one of these churches, and I'm going to be paraphrasing this conversation since now this is third-hand information, but the conversation essentially went, her mentor asked her some clarifying questions. Tell me about the church. So Janine was talking about the church, and her mentor basically looked her point blank in the face and said, "You shouldn't go there." Pretty bold, right? You shouldn't go there. Well, why shouldn't we go there? I don't think you would be good for that church, and I don't think they would be good for you. Well, why not? You're not gifted for that kind of a church. And then she said this, and this is what really stuck out to me. It's something that I've held on to. It was a big point of clarity for who Janine and I are as a couple. And she said, because you are spiritual agitators. You're welcome. She said, you are spiritual agitators. They aren't ready to be spiritually agitated. They need somebody who's just consistent and can come in and just do the thing that's been doing. They don't need you to come in and shake that up. You guys are spiritual agitators. And so we held on to that. And what that helped me understand as we were going through the process. Fun fact, spoilers, we didn't end up in Nashville, okay? As we were processing through that and just thinking it out and what that meant about us, it just stuck out to me that wherever we go, it has to support and be integrated with the inseparable, the irreducible qualities of who we are as people. One of the qualities of who we are as irreducible qualities of who we are as people is that we are spiritual agitators. Now, as I think about that in terms of the church, it doesn't always go really well together. Churches, over the course of time, have gotten pretty comfortable in our ways. We don't like it when things shake us up. Nobody really likes to be shaken up, and certainly nobody likes to be agitated. And so our gifting isn't always welcome in churches. So it's a unique thing to find a family where that is welcome. But I think there's a reason why our gifting isn't always welcome. And it's actually a sad reality because I think God allows for and wants and actually gifts people to be spiritual agitators in the church. Which means if we're thinking about how the church should function and the type of people the church should receive and the way a church should operate, there are certain irreducible qualities about a church as well. And an irreducible quality is if you take one of those qualities out of a thing, it no longer is the thing anymore. Now, over the last several decades, the church in America specifically has lost a few of its irreducible qualities. For the last few decades, we've actually been governed mostly by some incredibly valuable and integral giftings within the church, and that's shepherds and teachers, okay? Incredibly important gifts to the church. However, they're not the only irreducible qualities of leadership in a church. And if you take some of those other voices away and all you have left are the shepherds and the teachers, you lose a bit of what the church means in order to be the church. And we start looking inward on ourselves and we forget about everything outside of us. In fact, when we are left to ourselves, we actually get insulated and isolated and inward looking. Here's how missiologist Alan Hirsch states it. Left to their own devices, most organizations tend towards a sort of sociological conservatism that will increasingly forego engagement with their context in favor of preserving what they see as their repository of inherited ideas. In other words, they turn away from missional engagement and toward an increasingly traditionalist, sentimental interpretation of reality. You all get that, right? I get it, yeah. Instead of looking forward to a possible future of which they are called to be a part, they look back to an idealized past. Now, Hirsch is incredibly wordy. What he's essentially saying is left to our own, and when we start removing even some of these irreducible qualities of what makes a church, and even what makes a disciple or a follower of Jesus, a disciple of Jesus, we start to be more consumed with our ideas about Jesus rather than right belief and teaching and engagement with the mission of Jesus. There's a significant difference. You can know all, we've said this all year, you can know all about something, but knowing something and participating with something is vastly different than knowing all about it. Knowledge is included in both sides, but one is a knowledge of how do we enter into it, and the other is simply fact-finding. The church for the last several decades has gotten really good at fact-finding. We've gotten intelligent, but we've also gotten more comfortable. Here's the bad news. Nobody grows when they're comfortable. Church doesn't grow. The kingdom doesn't grow. We don't grow. And what's worse is if we're comfortable, there's a chance that we've traded out one of those irreducible qualities of what makes us a follower of Jesus. What are those irreducible qualities? We're going to be visiting one of them. I want to invite you to turn to Luke chapter 10 with me. Luke chapter 10. First 12 verses there. Now Jesus has just sent out, not long before this, he's just sent out 12 of his closest followers, the 12 disciples. They come back, and now he's sending out 72 more as we pick up in Luke chapter 10. After this, the Lord appointed 72 others and sent them 2 by 2 ahead of him to every town and place where he was about to go. He told them, "The harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Ask the Lord of the harvest, therefore, to send out workers into his harvest field. Go, I am sending you out like lambs among wolves. Do not take a purse or bag or sandals, and do not greet anyone on the road. When you enter a house, first say, 'Peace to this house.' If someone who promotes peace is there, your peace will rest on them. If not, it will return to you. Stay there, eating and drinking whatever they give you, for the worker deserves his wages. Do not move around from house to house. And when you enter a town and are welcomed, eat what is offered to you. Heal the sick who are there and tell them, 'The kingdom of God has come near you.' But when you enter a town and are not welcome, go into the streets and say, 'Even the dust of our town we wipe from our feet as a warning to you.' Yet be sure of this, the kingdom of God has come near. I tell you, it will be more bearable on that day for Sodom than it will be for that town." Now, there's a lot going on in this passage. Jesus gathers 72. Right off the bat, it's a different number than the 12. I don't know if you caught that. Now, there's something significant. We're not always sure what's significant about this number 72, but we know there's something significant about it. Okay? One of the things that scholars guess is significant is 72 actually happens to be the numbers that the nation of Israel thought were present in the entire world. They thought the entire world was made up at the time of 72 nations. At least that's how many they could reckon, okay? So in one sense, it could be very significant that Jesus is sending out the exact number of workers that represent every nation, every ethnicity in the world. That's pretty cool. Another possibility could be the amount of elders that Moses gathered in the Old Testament to help him lead the people of Israel. That's pretty straightforward as well, because Moses was a type of the Messiah to come. And when he gathered those leaders and he helped them govern the people of God, that's pretty significant. So whether it's governing the people of God or governing the nations and being a blessing to the nations, there's significance in this number. Jesus doesn't do things by accident. I think maybe Jesus has a number of these things in his mind. That there's a number of cross sections where this number 72 intersects. He cares about the people of Israel. He cares about shepherding them well and leading them well, but he also has his eyes on the entire world. Nothing is out of his focus. Nothing is beyond his authority. Nothing is beyond the scope of his mission. So Jesus has all of these things possibly in mind as he sends out the disciples. And here's one of the things that stands out to me about the places he was sending them. In verse 1, it says, he sent them out ahead of him to every town and place he was about to go. So Jesus is about to go to all of these places, and he sends 72 out, 2 by 2, ahead of him for a reason. Now we'll get into what they're supposed to do and the directions that Jesus gives them. But I want to dwell just a moment on the reality that Jesus is about to go there himself. Now, we've been talking in our Simply Gospel class that we have going on. We're coming up to our last week, but this past Wednesday, we just talked about this concept from author John Rittner, who talks about this irritating kingdom of God. And he talks about what kind of people we're supposed to be. And he compares it to something called an amuse-bouche. Right? A pretty cool word. An amuse-bouche, it translates into English meaning mouth amuser. And in fancy restaurants, an amuse-bouche operates a little bit like an hors d'oeuvre, but it's completely off the menu, and it's less than an hors d'oeuvre. It's not meant to be something that fills you up in any way. It's meant to just be a foretaste, completely off the menu. The idea is like this. The chef serves an amuse-bouche to a guest at a table, and the guest tastes it and think, oh my goodness, this isn't on the menu. This is so delicious. I'm getting a flair for the chef's style. And if this is what the free food tastes like, what will the actual thing be like? Jesus sends his 72 out as an amuse-bouche ahead of him. They aren't just an appetizer, they are a mouth waterer. They are a mouth amuser for what is to come in the person of Jesus. They are meant to be a foretaste. They are meant to leave people thinking, if this is what his followers are like, what will he be like? They're representing him and doing the things he did. That's why I think it's significant that Jesus sends them out to the places he would go himself. They're thinking, oh my goodness, this is the off-the-menu item. I can't imagine what the perfected dishes are like. So Jesus sends them out 2 by 2 ahead of him to every town. And he tells them, he gives them a list of instructions, things they're supposed to do, what they're supposed to say. He says, but first he says, the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. The harvest is plentiful. Now, this isn't Jesus' first time using agrarian concepts. This isn't the first time he's even stated the word harvest, but it is meant to give significance to this moment as well. You see, the harvest is something that the disciples, the followers of Jesus, are just entering into now. They're just starting the work at harvest season. Now, harvest season in and of itself is a big deal because harvest season has to happen in a limited amount of time. Jesus is adding urgency to the matter at hand. The harvest is ready. If you wait too long, it's going to go bad. Right? That's the agrarian metaphor. There's an urgency to the work that Jesus is sending his followers out to. But there's also something else there. They're entering the whole process of gathering in the crop just at the end, meaning they haven't had a part in anything else. They haven't been part of the sowing. They haven't watched it grow. They haven't watered it. They haven't nurtured the soil. They're simply coming in to collect it. It communicates something to them, that what they're about to enter into is both urgent, but also something they're not responsible for, in the sense of they didn't make it happen. They're gathering in something they didn't do, but they're participating in the work of God. Jesus is going to both come behind them, but here's the catch. God has already gone ahead of them. God has already planted, he's already prepared the crop, and it's ready for harvest. The only thing that's needed now are workers, people who are willing to go into the harvest. So Jesus sends them, and it says, go, the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. And then he says, ask the Lord of the harvest to send workers. Now I love this because Jesus sends his 72 in as workers, but he also says, now pray for more workers. The work is incredibly vast. God's word is incredibly effective, and now it's time for a large group of people to enter in around this and participate in gathering in the crop. God has gone ahead of them. Jesus is about to come behind, and now it's time to gather in the fruitful crop, but there needs to be more workers. So Jesus says, I'm sending you into the harvest, and you need to pray for more workers. And then he says, go. I am sending you out like lambs among wolves. There's urgency here again. And then Jesus does something that's maybe a little bit less comforting. He says, all right, so you're like a helpless lamb, and you're about to go into an area just absolutely filled with wolves. Now, I don't know if you've ever watched those videos online about like predator versus predator or anything like that, like who wins between this animal and this animal. I just want to know if you ever watched the sheep versus the wolf one. The scales are a little bit tipped on that, all right? The sheep don't come out very well. Sheep aren't good at defending themselves, and wolves are predators, and that's what Jesus is telling them. He says, you're like these helpless defensive sheep, and I'm sending you into an area filled with wolves. Super comforting. But again, Jesus is communicating something to his followers here. He's saying the work that I have for you is important. It's also dangerous, but you're not going to be able to rely on your own power. It's important and dangerous, and you won't be able to rely on your own power, even if you had any. And then he continues on. You're going out like wolves, like lambs among wolves, and I don't want you to take anything with you. Verse 4 says, do not take a purse or a bag or sandals, and do not greet anyone on the road. Again, urgency is filling this whole narrative of Jesus' instructions, but there's more than that. Commentators would be quick to point out that Jesus is not asking them to take off the sandals that they're currently wearing and say, you know what, this is a barefoot journey. It's not about that. It's not that they're wearing the wrong brand name or that they're going to offend anybody with the kind of sandals that they're wearing. It's simply that Jesus is communicating something else about the nature of his mission in the world. It's both urgent, and I don't want you to take any of your own preparations into it. Just what you have is enough. What you have is enough. Now, if Jesus were saying that to the church today, we'd all be saying, but I don't feel ready. I don't feel prepared. And Jesus would say, that's the point. Okay? I remember my first mission trip leading students on a short-term mission trip. We were going to northwest Minnesota, and we were doing some work there. A bunch of churches were gathered all in one building, and then we would break up into teams, and we'd go serve different areas and work on different projects. Fun fact, you can have a kid cut his finger off and still not get fired at some churches. So, good for me. But anyway, so we would come back from all these work projects, we would gather back, and then they'd have worship services every night, and they'd have some teaching, and then we'd break out back into our own church groups, and we'd kind of help students process through some things. Now, this was not only my first mission trip, this was month 2 of ministry for me, okay? Month 2. I still don't know what I'm doing now. Didn't know what I was doing even more then, okay? And so we were sitting, and there's this particular powerful night that we had. And after we released the students to go and play at the end of the night, the emotions were high. The tone of the night was really somber. And students, at least for the most part, really hung around. They didn't go anywhere. We would release them to go play. They could go do whatever they wanted, hopefully getting ready for bed. But they stuck around. And they started coming up to us one by one, and I was just with a group of leaders, and we were kind of talking about the night, just letting the students have their time, and they started coming up one by one, and God was doing something. He was moving in their hearts to start doing a whole bunch of confession and asking for wisdom going forward. So that's what they did. They started coming up one by one and asking. They would confess something in their life, and then they'd say, what do I do about it? Now, I wish that I had all the equipping that I needed to be able to say, well, here's what you do with that. And I really wanted to, in this moment, avoid saying anything cliche or avoid just the easy answers. And so I did the only thing that I knew how to do. I looked at my leaders and said, please don't answer anybody. Don't answer anybody. I don't think we have the right answers for this. I feel under-equipped for this, so what we're going to do is we're just going to pray each and every time a student comes up, and we're going to ask the Lord what he says to them. That's it. And so they would confess, and then they would ask a question, and then we would just sit there in silence. Super awkward. But the Lord was good and faithful, and every single time he gave the right thing to say. He helped us point them in the right direction or pray the right thing over them. And I felt like even though I was in over my head, God's spirit and power was alive and active because I was willing to get in over my head and go beyond the places I felt equipped. That's what Jesus is doing with his 72. Don't take everything you think you need. This isn't about your preparation. This isn't about your power. This is about God's power. You didn't plant. You didn't water. All you're doing is harvesting, and that's not even in your own power. Jesus is being super clear. Then he says, don't greet anybody on the road. I was just talking about this with somebody the other day, and it seemed kind of rude, right? Like, don't talk to anybody. The people in the town, they're the only ones that matter. The people on the road, they don't matter so much. The reality is, Jesus isn't asking his followers to be rude. He's asking them to be focused, right? Ancient Middle Eastern customs for greeting were actually incredibly intense and laborious. They were long. They took a long time. Jesus is adding and keeping the urgency in front of them. Go as you are and don't be distracted. Then he says in verse 5, when you enter a house, first say peace to this house. If someone who promotes peace is there, your peace will rest on them. If not, it will return to you. Now, this is a principle which missionaries and followers of Jesus all over the world have been using for decades. It's called the person of peace principle. And what it is it's about understanding where that harvest is. Jesus says, go, I'm sending you into the harvest. I'm sending you like lambs among wolves. The harvest is plentiful, the workers are few. How will they know what the harvest looks like? Jesus says, go and extend your peace to this house. And if a person that is characterized by peace is there, you're gonna know that's the place to stay. How do you know what the harvest looks like? You're gonna look for the signs of God's activity already present. Where is God's grace present? Go there. Now, if you're like me at all, you see some of these places in life where you're like, you know what? That seems like a closed door. I'm going to go kick it down. That's not what Jesus is telling his disciples to do. He's saying if the door is clearly closed, if a person who is not characterized by peace is there, your blessing is going to come back. If they are characterized by peace, you get to go and you get to stay there. You're going to understand that that is where God is working. That's where he's active. That's where his grace is resting. And I want you to stay there. You'll know it by the person who is characterized by peace. And when you get there, I want you to stay there, eating and drinking whatever they give you, for the worker deserves his wages. Do not move around from house to house. Now, eating and drinking whatever they give you. He's giving the disciples permission to accept gifts. He says, you know what? Every worker in the kingdom, not just paid staff at churches, every worker in the kingdom is worthy of their wages. It's okay to accept the gift of food. If they practice hospitality like a good Jewish or Near Eastern person would, accept it. That's okay. You're not doing anything wrong. You are worth your work. However, don't move on from there. Don't move on, because while you're worth your work, don't exact more than you need. stay with them. Now, there was this thing about traveling rabbis on occasion that maybe were out for a little bit more than just the word of God and teaching and helping people follow the Lord with all their heart, soul, mind, and strength. Some of them would go from house to house to house, and they would eat all day long. Sounds pretty good, yeah. Jesus says, don't be like that. Remember, you're an amuse-bouche, people. You're a mouth pleaser. Don't be worried about pleasing your own mouth the whole day. When you find my person of peace, don't look for the next one. Just stay there. And understand that what God wants to do is good, and it's there. So you don't need to move around from house to house. And when you enter a town, verse 8, and are welcomed, eat what is offered to you. Now, it seems like Jesus just said this, right? So what's going on there? The followers of Jesus aren't just going into Jewish houses. They weren't just going into Jewish towns. Now, it may have been predominantly Jewish towns, but there would have also been Gentiles there, people who weren't Jewish, and people who didn't observe the rituals of the Jewish religious practices. They probably ate food and served food that was sacrificed to idols or that was considered unclean by the Jewish people. And here's what Jesus is doing, and here's why it's significant to slow down right here. It's so easy for us in the church to look at that inward-focused situation in our own churches, our own organizations, and we start looking about the past and what we prioritize and all of those things, and we sacrifice the mission. Jesus looks at the 72 and he says, it's possible that when you go into a town, the person of peace that you find is going to be a Gentile. Whatever they give you, don't even worry about the ceremonial cleanliness, because my mission is more important than your ritualistic purity. Jesus confronts the mindset and says, do not sacrifice the work of God in somebody else's life for your own ritualistic purity. Sometimes we have to be aware of the things that we're holding on that actually get in the way of the mission of God. So eat whatever you're given. I love that. Jesus just confronts that mindset right there. And if you read the stories of Jesus, he does it again and again and again with the scribes and the Pharisees. Why are you doing that? Why are you allowing your disciples to do this? Why don't they do that? And Jesus is like, you don't get it. The mission of God and what's going on in the world is way more important than the things you're concerned about. So he tells that to them here. And then he gives them these directions. Verse 9, he says, heal the sick who are there and tell them the kingdom of God has come near you. I love how commentator Leon Morris, what he says about this particular passage. He says, the message must be accepted and acted on by those who receive it, for the kingdom is near. This is the day of their opportunity. Let me read that one more time. The message must be accepted and acted on by those who received it, for the kingdom is near. This is the day of their opportunity. Now, Morris points this out because oftentimes we think about them proclaiming the message of the kingdom and we're thinking, well, they probably went out and said, did you know Jesus died for your sins? Well, if that's true, then how is he coming? Didn't you say he was on his way? Didn't you say you were coming before him? So what is the good news if Jesus has not yet died for our sins? Well, the good news is that the kingdom of heaven is at hand. There's opportunity here. There's a chance for you to intersect the divinity of God here and now, because the kingdom of heaven is at hand. That's why time and time again, when you read Jesus proclaiming his gospel, the good news that he preached, it goes hand in hand with healing or something miraculous and the proclamation of the good news. He doesn't just state something, there's something that happens. He doesn't just declare something, he does something. It's both. You can't separate the two. And so when Jesus sends his disciples ahead of him to do the very things he was doing, they're supposed to proclaim the good news the same way he did. What does that look like? It looks like healing the sick and proclaiming the kingdom of heaven. You see, because here's the reality. If the kingdom of God is near, if his rule and reign is truly close at hand, that has impact on our world. What is the impact? In this case, if somebody's sick, they're going to be healed. Jesus says that's what it means to be the foretaste people on my behalf. That's the thing that seemed like it was off the menu. But if this is what the foretaste is like, I can't imagine what Jesus is going to be like. We're getting a picture of one of the irreducible qualities of the followers of Jesus. He says, heal the sick who are there and tell them the kingdom of God has come near you. But when you enter a town and are not welcomed, go instead into its streets and say, even the dust of our town we wipe from our feet as a warning to you. Yet be sure of this, the kingdom of God has come near. Instead of going and kicking down the door of where God's not working to force something that isn't supposed to happen yet, just go out and let it be. Now, wiping the dust off your feet was a regular approach when Jewish people would leave a Gentile town, oftentimes as kind of a dig at the Gentile town, but also a way of them showing that they're free of somebody else's of guilt, is they would just shake the dust off their feet and they would leave everything that was there. We don't even want the dust from this town. Now, what's interesting is that was a regular practice for Jewish people leaving a Gentile town, but now we have Jewish people leaving Jewish towns, which means Jesus is doing something else. He's reorienting the good news of the kingdom around himself. And a rejection of God, the good news about God working in our world, is a rejection of Jesus himself, whether you're Jew or Gentile. So Jews now come under the same judgment as a Gentile for rejecting the good news of the kingdom. There's something to be responded to. There's something to be welcomed in. There's something to be received. He says if they don't receive it, shake the dust off your feet and let them know, you know what, the kingdom of God, it was near. It's like you missed it, but it was near. Then he ends in verse 12, I tell you, it will be more bearable on that day for Sodom than for that town. Now, Jesus isn't being a jerk. This was a regular expression. Sodom and Gomorrah, they were like the archetypes of sinfulness in the world. And so Jesus is just using a saying of the day to say, listen, you can let them know this won't go well for you if you reject the good news of Jesus. That's just how it is. Jesus is using significant language to communicate the severity of what's going on. That's our story. That's what Jesus does. That's what he teaches his followers. That's what, when Jesus sends his followers out on mission to do the same thing he did, he's saying, this is part of it. If you want to be a follower of me, these are parts of the irreducible qualities of what it looks like to be a follower of me. Now, if we zoom out from that story just a little bit, we look at the 30,000-foot view, we can notice something about this story. We can notice that what Jesus did by sending the 12 and then the 72 into mission on the world ahead of him, he's been doing since the beginning of time. We can look all the way back to Genesis 2 and see that when God created mankind in his image, he told them to rule and reign over all of creation, to cultivate something beautiful in his image the way that he would if he were doing it himself. The cultivation of life on the earth was meant to be in the pattern of God. And we didn't do so well. And so God started it again with the people of Israel. And he said, you know what? I want to bless the entire nation, so I'm going to make a people who look like me. And I want you to go into the world, and I want you to be a light to the nations. I want you to be a blessing through the earth. He promises Abraham, he says, through you, I'm going to bless the entire world. Guess what? He didn't do such a good job. And then again, we see in the person of Jesus, the true and better Abraham, the true and better Moses, the true and better Adam. We see in Jesus, once again, collecting a group of people to say, join in God's mission in the world. This is an irreducible quality of what it means to be not only a follower of Jesus, but human. To be part of his mission, cultivating life, restoring the brokenness in the world, undoing the wrongdoings around us. It's the irreducible quality. And so here's what I want you to grab hold of this morning. As we think about discipleship and as we think about mission, you can't separate mission from discipleship. You cannot separate mission from discipleship. By very definition of what a disciple is and what the mission of God is in the world, the moment that you separate one from the other, you no longer have the thing. It's like saying, hey, we have a square here, but just round out those corners a little bit. Still a square, right? It's not. Well, just add a side to it. It's still a square, right? No, it's not. If you remove missional impulse from a disciple of Jesus, you no longer have a disciple of Jesus. I'll be honest, I don't know what you have, but it's not a disciple of Jesus. You can't read the Gospels without understanding that being a follower of Jesus is participating in the things he did. That's our role. He is still sending us out ahead of him. He is still on mission in the world, both outside our very doors and across the entire world. It's both near and far. It's both here and there. God is active in the world. And truthfully, if we can't separate mission from being a disciple, then our only choice is to enter into his mission. And we can pay attention to this passage to find some keys of how to do that. If we want to enter into his mission, we have to pay attention to what Jesus taught his disciples. First is that we have to pray for workers. If you want to be about the mission of God and participate in the mission of God and be a follower of Jesus, Jesus says pray for workers. He has been active. He is active. There is a harvest, and he says pray for workers, but here's the catch. The prayer happens as you yourselves go into the harvest. You are on the way into the harvest and praying for more workers because God has been abundantly active and the harvest is urgent. And you and I are not just called to go in, but it's so much work that we're called to pray for other workers. I want to challenge you this week to start praying into and asking God to send workers into his harvest, to participate in the work that he has already been up to. And here's the beautiful thing is as you pray, you're going to notice something else happens in your own heart. You're going to notice that as you pray for God to send other people, you are more dedicated to what he has sent you to. You can't pray for the things God desires and not start desiring them yourself. I challenge you. You'll find it doesn't work. Your heart will come alive for your own sentness, for the mission outside your own door, and maybe for the mission all the way across the world. Wherever God sends you, he sends you ahead of him, and he says, pray for more workers. So let's do that this week. We'll pray for more workers. The next thing we learn from Jesus is that we rely on his provision. Just as the disciples were sent out without everything that they felt was necessary, you are being sent out into the world. Here's the truth. You will never feel ready for mission. You won't. And you'll always, like me, you'll always find a way around it to make an excuse and say, well, I just didn't have time. I just didn't have this. That whole I didn't have, or I'm not enough, or I'm not ready, that whole mentality signifies that we were planning on going into the harvest under our own power to begin with. Don't rely on your own provision. Rely on the Lord's provision. Here's my challenge. As if praying for the workers and feeling that in your own heart weren't enough this week, I want to ask you to do something. I want to ask you to get in over your head sometime this week. I want you to get into a situation where you feel completely out of your depth. I want you to get into a situation where you feel completely unprepared and completely unqualified. And I promise you, if you do that, you'll feel it, but you'll also see God's provision for you in that moment. The very best place to be is uncomfortable for the sake of the kingdom, out of our depth and underqualified. I'd like to quit the moment I feel really qualified for this position, because it means I'm doing what I'm doing, not on the power, relying on the power of God, but on my own capabilities. I don't want that. You don't want that. It's better to rely on the Lord's provision. So we pray for workers. We rely on the Lord's provision. And then finally, we go where God is working. We go where God is already working. This is going to require us to view all of life as within the authority and working of God around us. It becomes a bit of a treasure hunt to find, where is God at work? What is he doing? Where is that open door? I don't have to be worried about the places he isn't working. I just have to look for the places he is working. Which I think this is the hardest step of all. Even though we're looking for the movement of God and understanding that he's doing the most work, it requires something from us. It requires that we slow down enough, get our eyes off of ourselves, and start paying attention to where God is actually working. Well, that's hard because most of the time I'm wondering, well, why isn't God doing this? Or why isn't this happening in my own life? Or why can't I be there? Or why can't I do that thing? The moment you start looking for where God is moving, you realize how self-centric our society actually is. And it's that way because I'm that way. And because you're that way. We're all that way. We have to start paying attention. What if we were a people that just simply started paying attention to what God was doing? We didn't try to make anything happen. We didn't try to influence anybody. We didn't try to force anybody or coerce anybody into believing the same thing we did. What if we just paid attention and noticed, oh, that's characterized as peace. I understand. That's where God's grace is. That's a harvest moment. I can just step into that. What if we were just a people that slowed down and paid attention to what God was doing? We would be on mission with him every single day of our lives. And in the process, I think some of you would probably also take some of the pressure off of yourself. I think some of us this morning have felt like because God's on mission, that we're responsible for his mission. Here's the truth. You're not responsible for his mission. Your responsibility is to pay attention to where he is on mission. He's the mover. He's the changer of hearts. You're not. Let's enter into this week with that understanding. Let's pray.